Welcome, everybody. This is Bob Hollis with Mobius Intelligent Systems, welcoming you to the California Product Stewardship Council webinar. Just some quick housekeeping here to begin. The webinar is being recorded. All attendees are muted by default. We have quite a large audience today, so that keeps our background noise down. However, we highly encourage questions. That's what we're here for. So as a question comes to mind, you can enter it into the question panel on your GoToMeeting panel and submit that, and some of them will be answered as we go through the webinar, but many might be held till the end when we'll leave plenty of time at the end to answer all remaining questions. If you run into any technical issues, you can go to gotowebinar.com, our resources and FAQs, and they can usually sort things out for you pretty quickly. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joanne.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome, everybody. My name is Joanne Brash. I'm here at the CPSC headquarters, and I'm sitting with my executive director, Doug Cobald, and our intern, David. And we just want to thank everyone for joining us. And we have people from all over the country. We have California cities and counties. Just a quick hello to LA, Napa, San Jose. We saw some Marin County and plenty others. We have representatives from other states and other cities and other states outside of California, so we welcome you. We have registrations from multiple agencies involved with solar panels in California. So hello to CalRecycle, DTSC, several attendees from the EPA, both state and federal. And we also have recyclers, consultants, and several non-government organizations and nonprofits on the webinar today. So we welcome everybody, and we hope to share information, what we are learning here in California, and some of the projects we have at CPSC, so that we can share and everyone can learn and move forward together. So as Bob mentioned in the introduction, we encourage everyone to ask questions as you think of them. So we're monitoring the questions as we go through these slides. We'll try to answer them as we go. It always is helpful, in the moment, if you think of something, just to type it in, and we'll try to address it as quickly as possible. So today, we'll also have a question and answer at the end. So if you have bigger questions or if there's something we can't address in the moment, we'll definitely have time at the end. So today we're going to talk about just some of the regulations and the current status of solar panel recycling in California. We're going to share some information for two CalRecycle HHW, which is Household Hazardous Waste grant projects we have, and a special project funded by San Mateo County. We'll share some of the market research results with everyone and also address any of the questions we have moving forward. For today's panelists, we have our Executive Director, Doug Cobald, with us. He joined CPSC after decades working at Sacramento County, Yolo County, and plenty of other experience in local government. From City of Santa Monica, we have Drew Johnstone. He is the grant manager for our project together, and working on several other sustainability projects for the City of Santa Monica. We have also Steve Roderick, who's the former recycling coordinator from Butte County. He's also a board member with CPSC, and so we're really excited to have him. Steve is currently, although retired from his county position, still working with the City of Paradise and Parks and Recreation. He's going to speak today on some of his experience working together with us on the project and also from his years of work at Butte County. And then closing out the presentation, that's me, that's my face, Joanne Brash. I'm going to share just some of the data and some of the information we got from the solar installer interviews and the resident surveys that we did under the project. So without further ado, I introduce the CPSC staff and executive committee. We're a small but mighty 501c3 based out of Sacramento. Our board is comprised of primarily local governments. You can see our executive committee has Tuolumne County, City of Corning, Chula Vista, Del Norte, and the rest of our board also representing, in addition to local government, we have some recyclers and some haulers on our board as well. And everything we do is supported by our associates and our sponsors. So always a big thank you to everyone who supports the work at CPSC. In CPSC, our mission as a nonprofit is to shift the cost burden of end-of-life management off of a system that is government funded and consumer funded into one that engages producers in the end-of-life solution. So our mission is extended producer responsibility and product stewardship, in that finding circular economy solutions involves a communication loop between local governments and waste managers at the end of life to include the manufacturers and producers upstream creating the products. So that's what we do. We engage and we represent a lot of local government. So it seems like a good leeway to introduce our executive director, Doug Cobald. And so he'll talk about solar panels, because when we choose what products to work on here at CPSC, we often ask our local governments, what are the products that are most problematic? Which ones are hard to manage? Which products are growing in volume? And so solar panels has come up for quite a few years and has become increasingly a concern, not only here at CPSC, but obviously in other states and local governments as represented when registration here on the webinar. So welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar today. So I'm going to just do a little quick discussion about the problem, where the regulations are, and where are we headed. And then the rest of the panelists will take over and give you the real information. So we have got a serious issue right now. We've got a lot of panels, the first generation and second generation panels coming off rooftops now with nowhere for them to go. They're getting either damaged through just expiration of their lifetime. They're getting damaged through hailstorms, not so much in California, but certainly in other parts of the country. They're getting damaged from fires. And no one knows that better than Steve Roderick, because of the Paradise Fire. They had a lot of panels up there that were burned out with the rest of the households. So, excuse me, another problem we have is we don't have any funding behind this. What is the funding mechanism to pay for the disposal of these? Like I mentioned earlier, we already have the first generation panels coming off the rooftops, but we have another bigger problem that's coming to light as well. The problem isn't that now there is a requirement for every new rooftop to have solar, which we think is a great thing. But the problem is we're now starting to see panels that are being constructed of inferior materials to try and compete in that marketplace. And so they're actually only lasting 5, maybe 10 years at the most. And so while we know that we're going to have this kind of a crest of a problem with panels that are coming off now, the older panels, in 2025, we're also seeing this potential that there's going to be this new added source of panels coming off in 5 years that were just put on. So this is a growing problem. In 2015, Senator Monning saw that there was a problem. He saw that there was issues coming. He decided he wanted to help solve the problem. He created SB 489, which would allow for these panels, which can be hazardous or non-hazardous, to be treated as universal waste so that our existing e-waste infrastructure could actually start processing these panels and recycling them rather than the alternatives, which was to landfill them in Class 1 landfills. So DTSC has been working through a process over the last 5 years, to try and develop the regulations. They finally got the regulations out as a final version in early 2020. Actually this month, last month in January. And so while we're not fully happy with what the net result of the regulations are, it's nice that they're finally out there. Also, one of the other things that was being held up was the authorization to actually designate these as universal waste. So DTSC had to seek authorization from the federal EPA, and they got that authorization on January 14th. So that was a hurdle we were really concerned about, because the regulations need to be complete by, I believe, April of 2020, due to the timeline is when they were started. And now that could have been a holdup for them, but fortunately they've got that authorization, so that will no longer be a problem in getting the regulations finalized, so we can start taking care of these materials. Okay, so what's going on right now is we've got a lot of panels coming off rooftops, nowhere for them to go. The answer that most local jurisdictions have to give is, we don't know what to do with them, to tell you to do with them. You just kind of have to hang on to them. We've got a solution coming, which is the DTSC regulations. But again, there's still no funding behind it, so they're very hard to manage, even as universal waste. But right now they're being handled as household hazardous waste. We had one jurisdiction that exceeded their 1 year storage time for 2 panels, and so they had to ship those off. It cost them $2,700 to ship off 2 panels. Not cheap. We have another local jurisdiction that is actually accepting panels, and they're on a limited basis, and they are charging $33 per panel. So to put that in, it's for hazardous waste. They're shipping them out as hazardous waste under a manifest to a location in Nevada, where they're sorted out and then further shipped to a Class 1 landfill in just north of Las Vegas in Nevada. And the cost for that is to the consumer who's bringing those panels in is basically 85 cents per pound on a 40-pound panel, so or $1,650 per ton. Really expensive to get rid of these things at this point, because when they have to be managed as hazardous waste. So we're glad that the universal waste regulations are coming around to finally get those out of that manifested situation, so that they can be processed more cost effectively. So we still need to get more information on what's being generated, and then how can we lower the cost of getting rid of these things, and where's that funding going to come from? So Joanna, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. And one of the big drivers of the 2 CPSC pilot projects with CalRecycle is to gather the data, gather the information, so that we can design effective programs at the local level. So our next speaker is going to be Drew, and Drew's from Santa Monica, who has a very robust solar program. So he's going to share some information on their local program.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Drew Johnstone. I'm a Senior Sustainability Analyst in the city's Office of Sustainability and the Environment. And our team is tasked with helping the city meet targets approved in our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, such as achieving water self-sufficiency by 2023, zero waste by 2030, and carbon neutrality by 2050 or sooner. And I'm particularly proud of our team and what we're doing on decarbonizing our buildings. We're a member of a community choice aggregator, and over 91% of our customers are on 100% green power, which is delivered via utility scale renewables delivered to our city. And in addition, we've shown leadership in our new construction building codes. Since 2016, we've required all new residential and commercial buildings to install on-site solar photovoltaics. And to help support solar installation in the city, we have developed the Solar Santa Monica program, which has been in place for about 12 years. And the program helps guide homeowners and businesses through complex solar procurement process. But admittedly, the full life cycle accounting of solar had not been discussed until very recently. One of the main selling points of solar is its longevity, with no moving parts and warranties that last for 25 years or longer. We are seeing systems, installed decades ago that are still working. But unfortunately, we don't have really good data to say for certain how many of those legacy systems have been decommissioned and where those panels went. So I'm really excited about this CalRecycle grant opportunity that we've been awarded because, we're able to pilot a PV recycling collection event. And I think this is, so important more than ever because we're seeing solar being installed at a rapid pace. 2019 was actually a banner year for Santa Monica. We had 102 systems installed in our 8 square mile city with a total capacity of about 901 kW. So that brings our total citywide capacity a little over 7.3 megawatts. Yeah, we have 983 total systems, and we probably have somewhere between 28 and 30,000 panels, depending on the wattage of each panel. So yeah, we think, some of the first gen systems, we probably have a few thousand panels out there that are likely going to be decommissioned in the near future if homeowners want to upgrade to the latest equipment. We shall see, though. We just don't have much good data, so that's why, I think this grant has been really great, because we've been able to survey our solar owners to sort of gauge their, the age of their system and their plans for the future. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. Here's just an example of one particular project that's really close to the Santa Monica Pier. It's the Lobster Restaurant. They were an early solar adopter back in 2008. You can see they had 175 watt panels. We don't see those anymore. But they're looking at replacing their standing seam metal roof, and the owners figured, while they're doing this roof replacement, how about upgrading to the highest efficiency panels, since this particular system's already paid for itself and it doesn't cover all of their bill. They're looking to upgrade. So they reached out to the city as to what they could do. And unfortunately, we don't have a process in place locally. So fortunately, we were able to recommend Habitat for Humanity, which does collect working solar panels that they could use on some of their projects, or donate to other places around the country, or even around the world that are looking for solar panels. Is there one more slide, Joanne, or is that it?
That's it for Santa Monica. Thank you, Drew.
Okay, sure.
So our next speaker is going to be Steve from Butte County, and Butte County is also piloting a CalRecycle project with CPSC. And Steve spent years working with the county, and as Doug mentioned, also living in Paradise, is experiencing all the new construction and all the solar installations that are happening up there. So take it away, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Yes, Butte County, if you're not familiar, kind of a medium-sized county. We consider ourselves rural. However, CalRecycle refuses to do so. But regardless of that, we were an early adopter as well for solar installations. The county at the time in 2003 installed one, at the time was one of the largest arrays of panels that power the county center. In addition to that, Sierra Nevada Brewery has basically installed a brewery under their solar array. It covers the entire top level of the brewery itself. So between those two, we have a lot of aging panels in the county, because both of those went up approximately the same time, almost 20 years ago. So, and when preparing for this grant, I went around to various solar installers, and they, to their credit, were stockpiling their used panels. They weren't doing anything illicit with them. In fact, one of the installers had to turn away many people requesting old panels for reuse. Now, those were largely illegal grows at the time, off-grid grows, and they knew that that was not the best use for that, because illegal grows don't have a good track record with regard to environmental compliance. But nevertheless, based on Butte County size, we have there's a tremendous amount of backlog. Just in Butte County, probably tens of thousands of solar panels ready to get compliantly recycled. If you multiply that throughout the state, you're looking at a huge inventory of panels when this recycling program, finally gets started. Which brings me to my point. Initially, there is a tremendous secondary market for used solar panels. Now, most of the panels that are coming off have just lost efficiency. They're not damaged. They're still viable. Secondary markets include general off-grid applications for applications that have lower wattage demands, rural or third world applications, irrigation systems for places that are off-grid, and even disaster relief Those can be staged, ready to go for if an area gets a, earthquake, hurricane, wildfire. They can be used in those applications because they're perfectly viable panels that have just lost a measure of efficiency. And don't provide them to illegal grows. But the key is they are not and should not be referred to as waste. We use the word waste way too much. They are previously owned. It's just like a car. We don't refer to a car as waste, even though it's a rolling bucket of hazardous materials, because it's still a viable car that can be sold again, refurbished, repaired. So cars are not waste, and solar panels aren't waste as well. So that's where I think we should focus on with respect to solar panels. Now, this slide, that's waste. Solar panels, because we can't accept them at our household hazardous waste facility, are being hidden in general debris. This one was put into an e-waste bin. It wouldn't fit completely, so they tried to crush it and fold it. Yes, and this is what's going to happen more and more unless we get a viable recycling program for those panels that are indeed broken or just not viable. So, and this one, just to let you know, it's in a 55-gallon sealed drum and ready to be shipped off as soon as there's a viable outlet to take it. We don't want to spend the expense right now to handle it in the option that we have, but when that time comes, we will handle it appropriately as universal waste when it gets to that point. Next slide, I guess.
Thanks, Steve. I did see a hand raised from Sergio. We are not going to be unmuting people, so if you could please just type your question, it's going to be a lot easier for us to address it. So Sergio, I don't know if you meant to raise it, but go ahead and ask the question in the text box on the GoToWebinar. So as mentioned, CPSC is contracting with Butte County and City of Santa Monica for 2 hazardous waste grant projects with CalRecycle. Both of these projects have a couple of components. Part of it was to do some market research and to establish some data, some baseline data as to ownership and installation issues. But ultimately, the goal is data. We will be doing collection events in each of these jurisdictions. I know this is a lot of the attendees usually are curious about these collection events. If we were to do the collection events today, we would have to pay some of those prices that Doug mentioned, and they would probably be landfilled. So unfortunately, we just don't want to do that unless we're posed with no other issue. But given that the regs are likely going to be finished soon, we're holding off on planning any of the recycling events until we can handle them as universal waste. I do see a question here typed. For the pilot collection events, who is the vendor handling the recycling PVs? That has not been established, especially because we don't know how the regulations will be. So if it is under a household hazardous waste manifest, we will have to contract with an HHW handler. If the universal waste regulations are officially updated, we would have to find a recycler that met all the compliance regulations for those. So right now, it is cost prohibitive to collect and ship them out of state. We wouldn't be able to collect very many panels. So if we wait until these regulations are updated, we can recycle them closer, so less transportation, and we can actually recycle them. So the collection events have not actually been set, but we are hoping summer 2020. Last June, we did a similar webinar where we shared information, and we shared information on the 2 CalRecycle projects. And San Mateo County attended it and was very interested in doing similar research in their jurisdiction. So we were contacted by the Office of Sustainability and contracted to do a special project that included a similar resident survey and installer interviews using similar questions as the other two projects. This way we can build our database, we can add to our data set using similar questions. So if there's any other counties or cities on the webinar that are interested in some of the results that you see here today and would like to do a similar project in your area, I encourage you to contact us. Now that we have template material, it's easy to roll out similar research projects in other jurisdictions. And as Doug mentioned, it is a growing problem, and now we have the data to prove it. So more and more people are interested in solar panels. We see a lot more press coverage, and we see it in a lot more media. So when we asked the residents of Butte County, City of Santa Monica, and San Mateo County, we did an online Survey Monkey, and we got hundreds of responses from each area. And we asked them how many of them actually had solar panels on their residents. You can see San Mateo County, a much higher percentage. And when asking if you're considering to install in the next 5 years, across the board, it was like 13% or higher. Again, San Mateo showing a stronger interest in installation. But we know that even though this is just a survey to engage and to measure interest and ideas, we know for a fact we will be seeing more solar installations due to the California Energy Commission's rule that they passed in 2018 that all new home construction will have solar panels after January 1, 2020. We are after January 1, 2020, so we will be seeing a lot more consumption and installation going forward. And just a little information, I do believe Butte County has received exemption from this rule. So not every new home built in Paradise within the disaster area is required to have solar. They want, in that particular exemption, they didn't want to add cost to an already cost burden area in the fire zone. But in all other areas, we will see all new construction having solar panels. Our concern with this, like Doug mentioned, is that we will see an influx of low cost, low quality, low durability solar panels that won't have a lifespan of 20, 25 years. When we asked the resident survey, so we asked them of the people who had solar panels. So these questions only went to the people who answered yes. The reported range of installation years was anywhere from the oldest was 1971. The most recent was actually a survey respondent that said, oh, next week, our panels are going in next week. So it's a wide range. We know that, the 1971 panels are beyond their expected lifespan, but that particular response did say that they were still working. So when we looked at it, we asked them, what year were your solar panels installed? You can see the average year of installation ranged, with San Mateo being an early adopter. And most of the installations did happen in the last few years. 77% of our survey respondents said responsible disposal is important for solar panels. So that was across the board. So of the survey respondents that do have solar panels, we asked them, what was your instructions on end-of-life management? Less than 10% of all the survey respondents said that they received instructions. So this quote down at the bottom was one of the qualitative responses that I thought was really interesting. Most of the responses were did not receive information, or it might be in the lease, I should go check it. But this particular quote was pretty interesting because they acknowledged that there's a potential problem down the line. So there was no recycling instructions of any kind. My panels are leased until 2025, but at the end of the lease, Solar City has the option to relinquish the panels. And if they do that, it becomes my problem. But when we asked, where should they get this information? Most residents and survey respondents listed the county website and their installers as their primary source of information, as opposed to direct mailers, social media, and other forms of communication. So now we're going to move on to the phone interviews. So across all 3 jurisdictions, we were conducting phone interviews. We populated lists of all the solar installers in the area, whether we were using kind of the internet or pulling directly from the permits. And we tried to get as many as we could. So thank you to all the installers that helped us. Their information was very valuable, and many of you did register for the webinar, so we appreciate everything. But very few offer advice to their customer. And what was interesting is many of them didn't know what to recommend. So oftentimes we heard, just look at the county website, or I'm not sure it's under warranty. So it really shows that how important education is and how the county really needs to work with the installers when establishing a program. Since the residents communicated that they feel the information could come from those 2 sources, it's important for those 2 sources to work together to make sure that their information and what they're communicating is on the same page. But in general, most have not had to actually deal with this yet. So every single installer said, oh, this is a problem for another year, or this is something we should start to look into, but isn't a current problem. So learning that, we started to ask about, well, what are you doing with the panels that you're taking off? So we learned that working panels are often donated and repurposed. So in our research, we've met a couple really cool companies. This top right picture is a piece of furniture that's made of a repurposed solar panel, and it actually has like a USB port on the side so you can charge your phone, etc. And this picture below is a scooter made with a repurposed panel. We've also learned through our solar installer interviews that a lot of times they either use Habitat for Humanity, they maybe find local crafters or projects. One installer says he often uses it for people renovating RVs. We all know that the van life is growing with popularity, so looking for off-grid electricity for vans and RVs are becoming popular and a good use of working panels. So we asked installers, what are the sources and what are the causes of unwanted solar systems? So I wanted to bring attention to this word unwanted. Most of the panels that are coming off still have some life to them. So the ones that are broken, if they're under warranty, can be sent back. We did hear from a couple installers that if there's only 1 or 2 panels, that the manufacturer, they just send the new replacements and maybe don't take back the panels if it's only 1 or 2 and not worth the shipping. We asked, why are people taking the panels off of their house? So we heard about water getting into the electrical systems. So having to change the whole system out encourages an upgrade of the panels. Tree branches, I guess you could also add fires to that list, or other kind of natural disasters. Animals, not as commonly reported in San Mateo and Santa Monica in the more urban areas, but this was a common explanation we got in Butte County and some of the more rural areas. And then also issues with shipping, malfunctions, or just inefficiency. So people just wanting to upgrade, get a more newer panel system. These are examples of why people would take down panels off their house. And we asked them, what do they do with unwanted panels? So many of them, like we said, donate or reuse if they're working. Several, actually at least one in all 3 jurisdictions, at least one installer said they are stockpiling and waiting for a solution. And some of them are taking them to landfills or recyclers. We've heard rumors that some people just drive out to Reno, which is the closest out-of-state landfill. We've heard, rumors that that you can just, actually it's not a rumor, but you can take it to an HHW that is accepting them and then just pay that particular fee. But most of them are at this point looking for opportunities of donation and reuse. But we hear the stockpiling all the time. Here's another example from Marin County. When an installer had a large supply of panels that were not working and nowhere to return them to, Marin Sanitary Service could not accept them because there's still hazardous waste under the current regulations. So here's a picture of them going back into the installer's storage. And we have not actually checked up on an update if anything has happened with those. So all this information is great, and when we start asking how can we actually improve recycling for solar panels locally, we ask both residents and installers. The goal being, how can we feed back information to the counties and to CalRecycle so that we can establish an effective program once the universal waste regulations are finalized. Here you can see some of the quotes pulled directly from some of the the surveys. And again, we had hundreds and hundreds of surveys. So we really are pulling out the ones that are trying to capture the general responses of residents across the state in those 3 jurisdictions. So just access to knowledge and access to information of what do I do when I have an issue with my panel. Looking at what local charities or what local reuse opportunities are available. And also looking at convenient collection. So no resident wants to be stuck with a panel sitting in their storage. An installer might be a little more flexible with a warehouse, but the residents really aren't interested in kind of stockpiling those. So just that convenient collection standard where it's free, easy to get to, and convenient. We asked the same question on our installer interviews. How can we improve recycling programs for solar panels locally? And what we found were the feedback from the installers were much more technical. They wanted reusable components and modular design so that they didn't actually have to replace the entire panel. We heard feedback about producer responsibility and the role of manufacturers and dealing with recycling and end-of-life management. And for those of you who are familiar with CPSC, these are words true to our hearts. We always believe that manufacturers have a responsibility to help local government and to help consumers establish effective programs for the products at the end of life. We also heard a lot about the regulations. This was across all 3 jurisdictions, frustration with not knowing when or where to take the panels, and really looking for standard operating procedures to deal with these particular products. And like Doug mentioned, there's a lot of variety within the product type. So just having access to information, access to recycling sites and collection sites. So we are planning 2 collection sites. We are hoping for summer 2020. Once we release these dates, once we make a decision, I encourage everyone to get on our solar panel listserv. So contact CPSC and you can be kept up to date. And what's going to happen with these 2 collection events is we're going to offer free disposal for residential solar panels. We know that a lot of residents aren't going to be the ones taking off the panels. It's a similar product like carpet. The installers are handling the product more than the consumers themselves. So we're establishing with CalRecycle an operating procedure where we can accept the solar panels from the installers with a signed agreement from the resident, acknowledging that these panels came from a house and a residential property and not a commercial property. So again, the goal of this would be to collect as many panels as we can with our budget. And we're going to use that for data. When were they manufactured? What's the brand? What's the problem? And at these collection events, as an adherence to the waste hierarchy, we're going to have opportunities for reuse and donation. So if the panels are still working, we could find opportunities for donation there at the event. Those that are not working, we'll handle according to the laws at that time. And for those who have commercial solar panels, we cannot accept them for free under these collection project grants, but we will hopefully be working with a recycler who can have their own stand, their own booth to collect solar panels from commercial sources. The goal being, we just want to fill the truck. We want to make sure that we can collect as many solar panels as possible, but the free collection will only be offered to residential solar panels. So what can you do to help? We always like to leave our attendees with a positive note and some information on how they can participate in a circular economy. And the first being to invest in panels that are durable. Look for a warranty. Try to look for ones that have non-hazardous components. If you notice a problem with your system, we encourage you to repair or to fix the part that is problematic before it comes to a system failure. But if they do need to be replaced, whether you want to upgrade or there's another issue, if they're usable, we encourage you to find a donation. So look for your local Habitat for Humanity, post them on Craigslist for any DIY refurbishers. If the panels are broken, damaged, or have any kind of hazard to them, but they're still working, you could look for refurbishing or recycling. There's a couple facilities, for example, PV Recycle out in Tucson, Arizona. But again, you have to handle them under the current regulations, and under the regulations right now, they are considered hazardous waste. So follow the DTSC regulations. This is unfolding every month. As Doug mentioned, the EPA authority was just granted in January. So as we move forward into March and April, into the summer, we'll be following, CPSC follows the progress with the regulations, and we are engaged. So we're a good source of information, but you also can follow DTSC and join their newsletters as well. If you're in Butte County or the city of Santa Monica, I encourage everyone to attend the collection event. Again, we'll be collecting a lot of data and hopefully doing another webinar after these events to share more information on what we learned. So I encourage everyone to just get informed, get active, and to make sure you buy and handle your solar panels responsibly. So with that, we will take questions. You can go ahead and type them into the question panel. I see one right here. Will the events be open to all jurisdictions or specific to Butte and Santa Monica? So the free part of it, where we actually cover the cost, those are specific to Butte and Santa Monica. But as we go to plan, we know that one of the largest costs in these events are transportation. So we are trying to, like we call like a milk run, or find local jurisdictions nearby Butte or Santa Monica to maybe join in to add an extra truck or to make good use of our funds, whether or not we fill the truck entirely. So yes, the grant funding is specific to Butte and Santa Monica. the information and the planning part of it, we're definitely open to working with other jurisdictions, especially if they're near Butte and Santa Monica. San Mateo has expressed interest in doing their own event. At this point, we wanted to kind of wait and see how the first two go. Can one of the speakers repeat the cost per ton of hazardous waste collection and treatment of PV experience in California? Does that cost include collection, transfer, storage, manifesting, or just treatment? So that was a question for Doug.
Yes, thank you for that question. And so the 85 cents per pound was based on the $33 per panel charge by the local jurisdiction to the customer that's come into the facility, into the HHW facility. So what that 85 cents per pound or $1,650 per ton covers the cost of transportation from the HHW facility to the sorting facility up in northern Nevada or central Nevada, and then the cost of additional transportation down to just north of Las Vegas, and then the cost of disposal at the Class 1 facility. So it is all the manifest costs, all the transportation costs, and the disposal costs.
And we also know that doesn't include the externalized costs not calculated in a traditional cost, like the environmental damage from pulling out the metals and the other resources. Great, next question. What exactly is in the panels that makes them so difficult to recycle or dispose of? Also, what can be done to put pressure on the industry to set a standard of quality so cheap panels aren't acceptable? You want to take that, Doug?
Yes, I will. Okay, so what is in it? So we have two basic types. We have the silica-based, so they're monocrystalline or polycrystalline types. Those are the non-hazardous. So those are cheaper to recycle and dispose of. Then we have the film type, which has got the hexavalent chromium, it's got cadmium, tellurium, gallium arsenide, copper, indium, gallium selenide. So there's all these constituents that are hazardous, and so that makes the film type hazardous. Unfortunately, for the most part, most people can't tell the difference between the silicon-based and the film type. And so while I've heard from the industry, recently from the Solar Energy Industry Association, that about 85% of the panels produced today are the monocrystalline or polycrystalline. There are still the film type being produced. And so we need to be sure that we're handling these properly. And because it's difficult to tell the difference between the film type and the monocrystalline, they all have to basically be treated as hazardous until the universal waste regulations are completed.
And do you want to address the standard of quality?
Oh, and then the standard of quality. So again, our concern is that because there's going to be such a demand for panels because of the actions, because of the mandate to have solar on every new rooftop, that we're going to get what's called builder grade types of panels. So basically when you buy a new house, a lot of times you start with the base, which is the builder grade. It's the builder grade countertops, builder grade cabinets, carpeting, flooring type materials. So this will also apply to solar panels. And so if you want the higher quality, longer lasting ones, you may end up paying a little bit more for that. And so our concern will be that most homeowners may not think long term, and they'll choose those builder grade panels, which will then be coming off the rooftops fairly quickly. So that is an issue that we're addressing now. We're hoping that maybe the industry itself will be able to self-regulate that, and make sure those panels don't get in. But it's a little difficult to do sometimes for competing markets and for competition to come in and do that to us.
Great. Next question. When it's classified as universal waste, would you be able to store the panels longer?
You'll still need to store the panels under your permit by rule facility operating, but the avenue for getting them processed will be a lot quicker. You won't have to sit and wait for an opportunity, because the existing e-waste infrastructure should be able to take those panels and process them under their own existing processes. So there should be no reason to store them for any period of time greater than a year. But I believe that the storage time will still be a year.
For HHW facilities, there's an additional complication in taking residential panels. How do I make this bigger? Oh, I can't read the whole thing. Sorry. All right. For HHW facilities, there's an additional complication in taking residential panels. Residential HHW transportation is limited to a maximum of 125 pounds, which means even 2 solar panels can easily exceed the residential load size limit. Have any of your HHW partners found solutions to this issue?
I'll go ahead and take this one again. So we have been in discussions with DTSC. We have expressed this in our comment letters to DTSC through the regulatory process that the current CESQG limits for hauling and transporting these materials is going to be a limiting factor. Your question is on target. It would be probably 3 or 4 panels will get you over that threshold of being able to haul. And so we've expressed this to them. This is not the same threat as a lot of the other HHW materials that might be hauled by a resident or even by a contractor under a CESQG type scenario. So we have gotten no traction from DTSC on this. They have expressed they want to stay with a uniform CESQG limit for hauling, even though we've expressed that this is not the same issue, and we've asked them several times to have a different threshold, maybe up to 10 or 12 panels worth, so maybe 400 to 600 pounds allowance for hauling. So when an installer comes into and installs puts a new installation on your rooftop and they're taking an old one off, they don't have to be manifested because they're taking off 10 or 12 panels. They should be able to just haul those to a e-waste processor or to a solar panel processor without having to manifest.
Thank you. For those installers stockpiling the PV modules, have they run into store restrictions? I have not from our interviews, we didn't hear of any. Do any of the other panelists have any insight on that?
Steve here. The restrictions, given that they have no options, I think, and this is just me talking, it's not based, and the restrictions have, by requirement, have to be a little more flexible than, the 1 year, 80 days, right? Because there is no option. There is no place to put these panels other than, high cost of transportation out of state, and they're compliant. They're otherwise they're doing the right thing. They're palletizing, shrink wrapping, storing out of place, and again, most of these are still viable panels. They are not waste. So, I know the DTSC is if somebody gives it up and it's waste, in their mind, it is waste. However, realistically, it's not waste.
Thanks, Steve. So I'll just go through a couple quick questions. How will you assess if the panels are working or not working at the collection events? We have not figured that out yet. If you have ideas, definitely share them with us. Will you be landfilling them at a hazardous waste landfill? We don't want to, and that's why we're waiting on the events so that we can hopefully recycle them. At the collection events, will they be required to prove they are residents of those jurisdictions? Yes, they will. And again, we will provide an opportunity if the installer brings them in to have some sort of affidavit or agreement that they came from a house and not a commercial. Will you be emailing or sharing the recording of this webinar? The answer is yes. They are available on the California Product Stewardship website. You can listen to the webinar we did in June, and then we'll post this webinar as soon as we can, and it'll be available for listening and download. Let's see. There's quite a few questions. We don't have time for all of them, so I will address some of you through email. How does Habitat for Humanity deem solar panels reusable? What indicators are there for us to know if they still work and to what degree? I'm not too sure how Habitat for Humanity figures that out. It's something we could definitely investigate and feedback to everyone. And again, we haven't planned that part of our collection events.
I think one method that they could use is use a voltmeter, placing the panel in the sun and testing it with a multimeter or voltmeter.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Excellent suggestion, Drew.
I'm hoping you have one of those, Drew.
They're really inexpensive, actually, and I think most solar installers have them for operations and maintenance testing.
Great. Here's another question. Are there ongoing discussions with solar panel manufacturers to design take-back programs?
So we did broach that subject recently in our meeting with the Solar Energy Industry Association. They are not opposed to it. They are interested in talking more and finding out more information about how would that program be designed, how would it be rolled out, and ultimately who's going to pay for it.
Wonderful. Wow, there's some really great ideas coming through. I'm going to try to focus on just the questions. In your follow-up, it might be worth emphasizing that folks should ask Habitat or reuse facilities if they will accept the panels and not assume so. I would absolutely agree with that. We recommend calling your local Habitats or even finding other reuse opportunities before you actually take them off, if possible. There's also the Fix-It Clinic is interested in helping to assess panels and document durability. From Peter. So we'd love to work with Fix-It Clinic. Again, on the waste hierarchy, anything that promotes repair, reuse, and source reduction in general is a priority for us and many others in California. All right, if there's any other, there's quite a few large questions that might take a little bit more time than we have left. But basically, we're excited to move forward with both of these projects. We got $100,000 for the Butte County project and $50,000 for Santa Monica, which includes also education and outreach. The Butte County project also includes other products, such as reusable propane cylinders. Again, for those who are familiar with CPSC, solar panels are just one of the many problematic products we work on. So we're really happy to share our information. You can contact us. You can go to calpsc.org to find all the different products we work on. You can also find the different legislation that we are actively following and engaging with on our website. All four of our panelists are also on our website on the webinar link. So if you go to CalPSC, click the webinars, that's where we'll post this recording when it's available. With that being said, I thank everyone for joining us once again. I will follow up with some of these questions that I was unable to address during this hour. And thank you to our presenters and panelists for joining us. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and you'll hear from us soon.